disease and movement disorders. So before I start, I need to thank the colleagues, collaborators, graduate students who are working with me on these projects. Pretty clearly, the type of thing that we'll be discussing today is very multidisciplinary. And you see that there are folks that are affiliated with the engineering department. That's where I am from. Particularly Dr. Fitzpatrick and Bodenheimer, actually they're in computer science, electrical engineering and computer science in the same department. Dr. Daz is a former graduate student of mine who is still working on the project. And then we have staff scientists and PhD students. On the neurosurgery side, we have Dr. Conrad and Nimat, who are two neurosurgeons we are fortunate to work with. Dr. Spooner and you were neurosurgeons in training, and then Dr. Cow and Rampel are electrophysiologists, and you'll see what the role of the electrophysiologist is in this whole procedure. And then on the neurology side, we have Dr. Davis and Dr. Charles. There are other collaborators for other portion of the project that I will not be discussing today. But clearly, we are very fortunate here at Vanderbilt to be able to work across departmental boundaries. We're also lucky to have an engineering school and a medical school on the same campus. That gives us the opportunity to be in the operating room. That gives the neurosurgeons the opportunity to come and talk with us and spend time in the lab. And that really is the way we can make and move things forward. And maybe you'll hear about that in other talks or talking to your students. See that interdisciplinary work is really something that Vanderbilt fosters and encourages. So what we'll cover is first, what is a DBS procedure? What is a deep brain stimulator procedure? And what is it used for? Then we'll go through the various steps of that procedure and also see the various actors that are involved in that procedure. And then we'll describe some ongoing research projects that we're involved with, trying to improve and facilitate the various aspects of that procedure. Now, what is a DBS procedure? If you have questions, this is a small room. So if you have questions during the presentation, do not hesitate, and I'll answer them, or you can keep the questions until the end of the presentation. It's up to you. Now, what is a DBS procedure? A DBS procedure really consists in implanting in very specific areas of the brain a four-contact electrode. I'll just go there. So this is a four-contact electrode. You see the four contacts in that electrode. There is a wire that is going from those electrodes up to the top of this essentially this guide. The electrode is implanted permanently in the brain. After implantation, there is a wire that runs from the electrode itself under the skin and is connected to a neurostimulator. Now, neurostimulator has been called also the pacemaker of the brain, and it's really essentially true because those neurostimulators have been derived or are derived from heart pacemakers. Now, what does that neurostimulator do? The neurostimulator will send electrical impulses to those contacts there. It can be one contact, two contacts, three or four contacts. The voltage can be changed. The voltage can be positive. We can have positive and negative contacts between contacts. But the overall objective there is to create an electric field around the stimulator. That electric field will affect the neurons that are close to it, will change the firing patterns on those neurons, and hopefully will suppress the symptoms of the disease, of the Parkinson disease, and not create side effects. Okay, so really the idea is to create an electric field very close to certain very specific neurons in the brain. So what is it used for? Mainly for the treatment of Parkinson disease, essential tremor, dystonia. I don't know if you know, but there are about 5 million people in the US who are affected by movement disorders, and 1 million of them are Parkinson disease patients, with about 65,000 new cases every year. So it's a disease that affects a lot of people, and if you know anybody who has been affected by that disease, it's something that can really affect the quality of life pretty substantially, especially when the disease is advanced. It's also used not on a routine basis, but on an experimental basis for the treatment of certain psychological disorders, such as obsessive compulsive disorders or depression, and it's also explored for the treatment of chronic pain. The difference there between the treatment of the movement disorders and psychological disorder is that the target of interest is different. So essentially the same principle, but you are going to put that implant somewhere else. So you have to find the right place to put the implant to treat the symptoms or the disease that you want to treat. Now, how well does it work? Well, one says that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I think that a movie is probably worth 1,000 pictures. So what I would show you there are two movies, okay? Movies of one patient suffering from dystonia and another one suffering from Parkinson disease, and you will see the difference between the pre-implantation state and the post-implantation state, and I think that those movies will speak for themselves. Okay, so the first one is a dystonia case. You'll see that this is at the time the movie was taken, this was a relatively young boy. He was normal up to the age of 8, and then you'll see that the dystonia disease started after the age of 8 and reached a point at which he just couldn't stand anymore. So this is a normal state of this young boy when he is awake. I mean, the only time when he would actually have some relief is when he is asleep. Okay? He was medicated. I mean, it was impossible, essentially as possible to treat him. What you see here is the boy after implantation of the two stimulators. They haven't been turned on yet. Usually the stimulators are turned on about a month after the procedure. Patient goes back home. The stimulators haven't been turned on yet. At that point, he is in the neurologist's office. The stimulators have been turned on. Now you can see that his legs are pretty skinny. I mean, he hasn't been able to exercise and do any type of exercise for years. And you'll see also that the effect of the stimulator is actually cumulative. And slowly things are going to get better. Okay? So this is a few months after the procedure. I don't recall exactly how many months after the procedure, but you see that at that point, he's already gaining fine motor skills back. Right, and that's the punchline. So I mean, it's just going back on his bicycle. He was able to ride his bicycle before, of course, but so he's going back essentially to where he was before the implantation. No, sorry?
What period of time is that? The time
I don't know exactly right about, but no, the time between the implant and what you saw in the kitchen is 3 or 4 months, I believe. So it's pretty rapid. No, so at this point, this boy graduated from high school, I think. I mean, I don't remember if he's a senior or if he graduated from high school and he's leading essentially a normal life. He came back. He came back because the batteries ran out and they had to have the batteries replaced, and it's just really been leading an absolutely normal life. So of course, I mean, this is a pretty drastic. But dystonia is like that. I mean, dystonia is something that's really terrible if you're in an advanced stage. Now, the next one is will be a Parkinson disease case.
Okay, this is Mr. David Lamb. David, how old are you again? 45. 45. It comes from the Knoxville area. Dr. Brewer.
So the voice that you hear here is the voice of Dr. Conrad, who is the neurosurgeon who did the implantation.
We're here for DBS for Parkinson disease. He's obviously recently taken a medicine. He's on with dyskinesias right now. Biggest complaints are dopa-induced dyskinesias, significant on-off freezing, and rigidity when off medications, and motor fluctuations that go with that. They only see hold both hands out straight like that. And when you see do this. Okay, no. See? Okay. And now real fast with this. Both hands. Okay, which side is worse for you, your left or your right? Left side is worse. Mr. David Lamb, who underwent an implant for STN for Parkinson's about 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, and is nearly off all meds, and he is doing very well. And as you can see, he no longer needs his walker. In fact, he takes his walker for a walk. So, very good.
So that's 2 years after implantation. So I think that that's pretty convincing. Now, the process itself is relatively complex, and it involves many players. The first step is the selection of the patient. Not all patients are eligible for the procedure, and the patient selection is really usually made by a team of physicians, neurologists, the neurosurgeons, as well as physical therapists. And then the procedure, once the patients have been selected, the procedure needs to be planned. I mean, when we say planning, meaning, where are we going to put that implant, and how are we going to reach that location? That's what we're going to spend most of our time actually discussing today. That's done by the neurosurgeon. Then the placement is done in the operating room. And we'll see also that it is a process that requires the expertise of a team of physicians. We have the neurosurgeon in there, the electrophysiologist, and the neurologist. Because we'll see that implanting those electrodes is some type of an iterative process. I mean, things have to be adjusted in the operating room, and the expertise of those physicians is required. And then when the implant has been placed, then it needs to be programmed. And you see that you have an electrode with 4 contacts. There are a number of combinations that are possible there, and the neurologist will try to find the best combination that would suppress the symptoms of the disease while minimizing the side effects that you may generate by using this stimulator. And then finally, the outcome of the whole procedure is assessed typically by neurologists and physical therapists. Now, planning. You may have heard that in the video, the target of interest is the STN, subthalamic nucleus, typically for the treatment of Parkinson disease. Now, what you see here is a cross-section of the brain. I mean, it's a coronal cross-section like that. See that the STN is a very small nucleus that is deep in the brain. Okay, it's about the size of a black olive. Now, this STN is involved in a relatively complex communication network between the other nuclei, the substantia nigra, the GPI, the globus pallidus internus, the STN itself, and the thalamus. So there are communication, there are essentially wires going from one of those structures to the other. There are feedback loop, feed-forward loops, and it is believed that malfunctions in those connections is responsible for the symptoms of the disease. And what happens is that by going and putting this electrode at the right location, the communication networks are repaired, at least temporarily. Now, the difficult problem, and actually the key difficulty actually with the procedure, is the fact that the STN, or the target of interest, is not easily visible in current imaging modality. So what you see here is what's called a magnetic resonance image. I don't know if some of you got an MR. Okay, when you see an MR, you got maybe a CT. And we'll see some example of CT scans later on. This is an MR scan. The advantage of the MR scan over the CT scan is that the MR scan will show you the anatomy in the brain. The CT scan doesn't show you the anatomy very well. You see the bones, but you don't see the soft tissue contrast. So MR is used to try to see structures and substructures in the brain. Okay. Now the STN is there somewhere, and you see that there is essentially no contrast, there is no edge, there is no boundary that is visible in the MR images. And so what needs to be done is to try to relate the position of the STN, position of the subthalamic nucleus, with respect to structures that are visible in the image. So it's essentially saying, okay, well, I can see, this house, and I know that where I need to be is 10 feet to the left. Okay, so I can see the house, I can see those landmarks in the brain, and I'm going to move by a certain number of millimeters up, down, and so on, and that's where the STN should be. Okay, the problem with that is that it is only an approximate location. I mean, it's not very precise, simply because your brain is different than mine, and even though things are globally in the same place, they are not exactly at the same place. So that will give you an approximate target, and that target will have to be adjusted during the surgery. That's the whole issue, is to be able to adjust the target during the surgery. So the structures that are visible in the images are 2 points, the AC and the PC. the anterior commissure and the posterior commissure. Anterior means in front, posterior means in the back. Okay, so that would be the anterior commissure. That's a little, very little thing. It's about 1 millimeter, okay, a few millimeters. The anterior commissure is there. You see it on the, in the three orthogonal plane on the image, and that would be the posterior commissure. And what I'll do here is to magnify things a little bit, so you will see that they are actually, somewhat visible in the in those MR images. So I can go localize those things and then define, and then we need to localize an additional point in the mid-sagittal plane. So we have 2 points plus a point in the mid-sagittal plane that defines a plane. We pick up the midpoint between the AC and the PC, and that would be the origin of our reference system. Okay, that's the 0, 0, 0. Then when that is done, you could say, okay, I have my 0, 0, 0. I'm going to move left by 13.2 millimeters, posteriorly by 1.94 millimeter, and inferiorly by 1.27 millimeters. Okay, and I put the little cross there to show where that leads us, and that would be where the STN should be. Okay, and again, when you see it in the MR images, I mean, there is nothing that indicates that it's actually there, but that's where it is usually. Okay. Now, the next step, of course, is that once we have identified where we want to put that implant in the image, now we go in the OR, and we need to be able to put that implant at the right place. Okay? And that is done using what's called a stereotactic frame. Okay? A stereotactic frame is a device that lets you relate the coordinates in an image with essentially the coordinate in the physical space, in the operating room. And there are 2 types of devices. I mean, this one is a typical frame. It's called the Lexel frame, as I've written there. And then there is a small one there, and we'll talk about that one. Now, the Lexel frame is a generic frame. That's a frame that can be used for everybody. So essentially, you use it on someone, then you use it on someone else, and so on. So what's happening is that you take the frame and you screw it to the skull. So it's actually screwed with screws. Okay? Then you image the patient with the frame, and using references and so on, you can then relate the position of any point in that image to parameters. So you can change the position of this arc there, and you can essentially, well, I'm going to skip the details, but what you can do is that you can then sync an electrode at the exact location you have chosen in the images themselves. The other frame is this, and actually I've taken one example. And I can move it around so you'll see what that is. That's a frame that is used here at Vanderbilt. It is marketed by a company that's called FHC, the Fred Hair company. And the principle is quite different. Instead of having a frame for everybody, this frame is actually manufactured for a single patient. Okay? Just zoom in it a little bit. So we have 2 types of this frame. Now we can have a bilateral frame, so we can have implants on both sides at the same time, or we can have a unilateral frame, so we want to put an implant only on one side. And what you see there is the frame that is attached to a skull. It's not a real skull, that's a plastic skull. I'll show you what happens. What is done is that, I'm going to zoom that in a little bit. What you have are those self-tapering screws. So those screws are screwed in the skull, and you see here a CT image in which you see the bone anchor that has been screwed into the skull. It's about 8 millimeters in height. It's not very high, so actually you can screw it in the skull, and then you can stitch the skin. Okay, and so the bone anchor is not going to stick out of the head. And so what is done is that the bone anchors are put into the skull, then the patient is scanned, get a CT scan, and thanks to that we can find the position of those bone anchors. And then I'll show you how we can design a platform using the position and the orientation of those bone anchors, and then the frame is manufactured. So essentially what is done is that a configuration file is sent to the company that makes those frames. The frames come back through FedEx, okay, and the day of the surgery, the frame is attached onto the bone anchors. It is screwed in, okay, and then we'll see that we can put something on top of it to drive the electrodes at the correct position. Okay? Now, the thing is that you need to design that frame. Okay? You need to design that frame for a specific patient. And what you do to do that is a computer program that we call the planner. There are a few options for the planner. This one is a piece of software that we have developed in the lab that is commercialized by the company that's manufacturing the frame. Now what this looks pretty complex, but what that lets you do, simply load the MR and the CT images that you need to find your targets, lets you define or look at or localize your AC and your PC point, lets you localize the point on the mid-sagittal plane, will let you also define your entry point, will let you define your target point. And you see that now you have two trajectories that are defined. Okay? Those two trajectories are defined, and when you're happy with the trajectories, you are sure that they don't go through structures that you don't want to hit, that they are going to go to hit the structures that you want to hit. When you're satisfied with that, then you can create the platform, see if that platform looks reasonable. If it looks reasonable, then you send the configuration file to the company that makes it, and eventually the actual frame will show up and can be mounted on the patient's head. And we'll go through actually making a complete plan later on in the presentation. You see that's relatively simple. What happens during the surgery? Well, during the surgery, a micro drive, it's called a micro drive, is mounted on top of the frame. Okay, so now the frame is mounted back on the skull. A micro drive is mounted on top of the frame, and an electrode can be sunk into the brain. Okay. Now the frame is designed in such a way that if you go by a sudden death, pre-known death, you will hit exactly the target that you plan to hit at the time of your pre-operative planning. Okay, so you know that the geometry of the platform is such that if you sink that electrode by sudden death, you did exactly what you want to hit. What you see on this side here is a bilateral platform with the two micro drives that are mounted on top of it, and you also see some wires that are connected to that. We'll come to that later. All right, placement. So the micro drive is there. The frame has been put on the patient. The micro drive is on top of it. An electrode is ready to be inserted into the brain. Now, I told you that the target that we have determined, that the surgeons have determined prior to surgery, is just an approximate target. They need to first verify that it's a good one, or if it's not a good one, to actually see where the real target or the best target is. There are two ways to do that. One is to use what's called microelectrode recordings, and I'll give you a few examples of those microelectrode recordings. So they insert an electrode and they record the firing patterns of the neurons in the brain. Turns out that each structure in the brain will have firing patterns that are somewhat different, and your trained ear will be able to tell you by just listening to the chatter of those neurons that they are in one nucleus or the other nucleus, and so on. And that would allow them, if they, for any reason, I mean, if for any reason the plan was inaccurate, that will tell them, okay, I'm not in the right structure, I'm in another structure, I need to move by so many millimeters left, so many millimeters right, up and down, and so on. The other way by which they can determine if they are at the right location is by stimulating the patient in the operating room. The patient is awake. Now, the good thing is that the brain doesn't feel pain. Okay, there is no pain sensor in the brain, so you can actually put an electrode in the brain and the patient doesn't feel anything. So the patient can actually be awake during the procedure, and they stimulate during the procedure to see how the patient reacts. And they essentially try to find the optimal location for the implant during the procedure using both this microelectrode recording and the microstimulation. And then when they're satisfied with the location of the implant, they remove those microelectrode recording, remove the stimulating electrode, and put the final implant, which is this big 4-contract electrode. The electrode that they're using during the surgery are a little bit smaller than the ones that than the final 4-contact lead. Okay, so I told you that the brain chatters and that the different structures in the brain have different firing patterns, what you will listen to are actually 3 recordings. So what you see, this is a track. The track goes through the thalamus, then through the STN, which is the target of interest, and then to the substantia nigra. Now here you see the simply a printout of the waveforms that can be observed on the oscilloscope in the surgery room, and I'll play you the files. So that's one. So there's a little bit of a difference, but you have to be trained. I mean, you know, I wouldn't trust me, but so they're able to identify where. Oops. And so that would be the standard. That's a bit quieter. Okay. And so by simply syncing that electrode and recording to those things, they know where they are, or hopefully know where they are, and are able to adjust the target somehow if they have to. Okay. Hopefully the target has been selected well to start with, because if it has not been, the procedure becomes longer. Okay, so that's one of the problems with the procedure, is that if you cannot hit your target immediately, then you have to start looking around. Yes?
What happens if the track doesn't intersect the STN part? Do you have to replace the track? Or
Well, actually what you have is that if you look at the top of the drive, okay, so this is essentially a cross, and you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parallel tracks. And so you usually start with the central track, and actually what they do now is that they start right away with 2 or 3 of those tracks at the same time. But conceptually, you would say, well, let's start with the central track. Hopefully I'm going to hit the STN. If you don't, then you have to decide which one you are going to use next. So you would have to remove the electrode, and you have to sync it in the on the parallel track, using the system that we have here. Other systems don't require you to have parallel tracks, but that system does. Okay? Or you would have, let's say, 3 or 4 electrodes sunk at the same time to start with. Okay? And then you would have recordings on those 3, and hopefully you will hit the STN with one of them, maybe 2 of them, hit other structures with the other one, and that would give you a good orientation of where you are. All right, so at the end, when the electrode is placed, now we are going to the programming phase. Now again, this is where the final lead is placed. It's hopefully in the STM. Okay, one of the lead may be close to the substantia nigra, one may be in the thalamus, and the neurologist then will have to decide which electrode to use, okay, which contact to use to again minimize or to suppress the symptoms and minimize the side effects. Again, placement is critical, because if you are exactly at the right place, then you can see that a very small voltage will create a field that will hit exactly the region that you want to hit and nothing around it. If your electrode is far away, imagine that your electrode was here, then you would have to crank up the voltage, right? You would have increased the field, which has 2 disadvantages. One is that it would deplete the batteries quickly, and 2, you would now have an electric field that would hit a large region around the contact, and you may actually have side effects at the same time as suppression of the symptoms, and so you don't gain anything there. So again, accurate placement of this electrode is critical. First of all, at the time of planning, to try to have a procedure that is short, and 2, at the time of programming, because you want to be able to hit the target of interest without having to hit things that are further away. All right, so where does that lead us, the engineers, computer scientists? Well, our goal there is to develop now an infrastructure that would allow us to gather information acquired from a large number of patients, and then see if we can use that information that's acquired from a large number of patients to design and develop tools that would help in planning the procedure, in actually performing the procedure, and in programming the implant after the procedure. A key component of the project is a large data repository that we are in the process of developing. In that repository, this is essentially a big database, In that big database, we store images. So we store the preoperative images, we store the postoperative images, CT, MR, and so on, of a large number of patients. We also store information that's related to the patient, demographic information. It's called the UPDRS scores, which is simply a scale by which the severity of the disease is evaluated. We also store all the intraoperative information that we can acquire. So we store the location at which the implant has been placed. We store also the recordings. We store the response of the patient to stimulation. Okay? And we have that in patient coordinates, the XYZ, what we call the XYZ coordinates of each of those patients. And one of the big things that we are trying to do then is to normalize all those patients, try to create a big atlas that would allow us to capture the information from a large number of folks and then see if we can, for example, determine what's the optimal location for the implant. Can we simply select, a number of people for which the procedure has been very successful and then see where the implant has been placed on those ones and then use that information to try to predict where the implant should be placed in other patients. Okay, using that information then, try to develop planning assistance tools, intraoperative guidance, and programming assistance. The planning assistance, as I said before, well, one of the things we could do is to acquire the position of the lead in successful cases, then project somehow, and we'll get to that, project somehow the position of those leads in those successful cases onto a generic brain. Okay? Then when that is done, use that information to try to predict where we think, or where the program thinks, the implant should be placed, and try to do that automatically. Okay, what's the concept there? I'll try to make you a little movie that illustrates what I'm trying to say. Imagine that you have 5 volumes, and imagine that you know exactly where the lead has been placed in those 5 volumes. Okay? You could say, well, I would like to know, and I would just try to take a generic brain and say, this is my generic brain. I'm going to try to know in that brain where the implant has been placed. The simplest way to do that would simply be to superimpose all those brains, and you just bring them together, and then you average them. Well, you have a problem with that. Now, the problem is that if you average simply those brains, you'll just end up with a big fuzzy thing. Now, why? Well, simply because your head is different than mine, the shape is different, you have acquired the scan in one position for one patient, the other position in the other one, and this is really not a good normalization scheme. Okay? Because then, if you simply superimpose the position of those points on that average, they will be all over the map. It will give you essentially no information. And that brings us to the concept of what we call registration. So in our jargon, in the image processing, medical image processing community, image registration really means alignment or normalization. Okay? Imagine that I have a subject, that would be subject A, and then we want to align subject A to what we call the target. It's a target because we are trying to map this subject onto that one. Now, there are 2 pretty different brains, and the first thing you could do is say, well, I'm going to try to take this subject here, and I'm going to rotate and translate it. I mean, that would be your first intuition. So imagine that you have 2 footballs, right, and you need to realign those 2 footballs. You take one, and you would rotate it and translate it, try to put them on top of each other. Okay? Well, the problem you have with that is what? Well, the problem is that you cannot change the shape of an object by simply rotating and translating things. Okay? You don't have you don't have enough degrees of freedom. Now, you should be able to deform things. Okay? You should be able to scale things. You should be able to deform things. And that is the concept of non-rigid registration. So when you have just rotation and translation, we call that a rigid transformation because an object doesn't change its shape. If we allow an object to change its shape, we call that non-rigid registration. So we are deforming things. I mean, maybe you have seen, I guess you have seen movies in which one object is morphed into another one. I mean, you can morph an apple into a boat, we don't want to do that, right? I mean, we want to deform things, but we want to preserve what we call the topology of those objects. I mean, we don't want the eyes to be transformed into a nose, right? I mean, we want an eye, a small eye, to be transformed into a big eye, but it has to stay an eye. It cannot be transformed in anything. I'll skip the details. I mean, although I'm an engineer, I just didn't put a single equation on the entire presentation. But it was hard to do. But I've been able to avoid it. So I'll just again show you a movie because I think that will illustrate what we are trying to do. So imagine that you have two volumes. I mean, this is volume number 1, volume number 2. That would be your subject, and that's your target. Okay, and what you will see in the middle here is the deformation. The type of algorithm that we are using are 3D algorithms. They are fully automatic. I cannot show you it in 3D, and that's not very easy to do. So I'll just show it in 2D. And what you will see is that you will see a deformation of deformation of that volume onto that one. And things are going to get better and better as the algorithm progresses. Okay, so that's, see how the, I'll just play it again. So that's what a computer algorithm can do. Okay, so we can take two images and say, well, let's transform one image into the other. Okay, and that's fully automatic. Now, as you've seen again, if you look at it again, let's take a look at the structure. That's called the corpus callosum. Now, the shape of that structure is changed, but the integrity of that structure is preserved. Okay, so we are not tearing it apart, and that's one of the things that we need to do. Now, if we do our job well, then we have established what we call a mapping between this point, this volume, and this volume. So we can relate any pixel, a pixel. Again, in image processing parlance or jargon, a pixel or a voxel is a point in an image, pixel in 2D, voxel in 3D. It's a point in an image volume. So if we have done our job correctly, we have established a relation between any point in that image and any point in that image. And so if I have information that pertains to this volume, I can map that information onto that one. And so if I know where the implant has been placed in the first volume, I can also know where the implant should be placed in the other volume. Well, now if we do that, then we can revisit this idea of creating an atlas and using information from prior subjects to try to predict where the implant should be placed in new subjects. Because now we can register, we can deform those 3 volumes, if I can find the right thing, those 3 volumes to this one, and now instead of having those points all over the map, they will cluster pretty tightly. They will not be exactly at the same place. Why? Because as much as we would like, we are not perfect, right? So our algorithms are not absolutely perfect. There is some error there. And also, it so happens that the anatomic location at which the implant has been placed in those 3 patients may not be exactly the same. Okay, so you would not expect that the point we would end up with a single point. We are going to end up with a cluster of points, and that cluster of points hopefully will be pretty tight. Now, if that cluster of points is tight, then we can take the center of that cluster, for example. The new patient comes in and say, well, we just do the reverse operation. Now we take our atlas and we register it to the new patient. Okay? And then we project the position of the center of the cluster onto the patient. We say, well, this is where we think. When we say we, this is where we think the algorithm, well, actually, this is where the algorithm thinks that the target should be placed. Okay? Now, it has the advantage that if the algorithm works well, it will take into account differences between brains. One will have large ventricles. See, that's a ventricle. One will have large ventricles, and one will have small ventricles. Now, because of that, then the location of the STN may be displaced a little bit. And if we are able to really deform those volumes correctly, the algorithm will take those differences into account. So hopefully, we'll be able to better take into account anatomic differences between subjects. And that's what the surgeon does. I mean, the surgeons will take this rough approximation, and then he will have or she will have to adjust things a little bit to take into account differences between volumes. All right, so what can the computers already do? We can register automatically all the images that are used for planning. Okay, so the images that are used for planning are CT images and MR images. We can find the bone markers and their orientation in the images. That's thanks to an algorithm that my colleague, Dr. Fitzpatrick, has developed. We can predict the visible anatomical landmarks with submillimetric accuracy. We just conducted a little study with our neurosurgeon colleagues, and we have shown that the accuracy with which we are able to predict the AC and the PC point is equal to the variability there is between the surgeons. Okay, so we are essentially doing as well as them. Now we can also predict the target points. That's the validation is still ongoing. We are playing a little game with them. Predicting where the target should be. We don't tell them where it should be. They predict where the target should be, and then at the end of the surgery, we see if they are closer than we are. Okay, this is not perfect, of course, because if they are satisfied with their point, it still doesn't mean that our point was bad. Simply they never went there, and so they never tested it. So we cannot really know if we are better or worse. But that's the best we can do without asking them to have another track just to test all points, which would be much more difficult to get through the IRB here at Vanderbilt. And then we can also suggest entry points. We didn't spend a lot of time on that yet. This is something that can be done. One of the issues with the selection of the entry points is that you want to find a point in such a way that the trajectory that you select will not hit any vessels. Okay, that's one of the big fear of the surgeon is to hit a vessel as they do the procedure, and so have a hemorrhage. So they need to avoid that, and one of the things really is to choose the correct entry point to avoid vessels. So the plans can be automatically pre-generated. We can submit those plans to the surgeons and simply ask them to edit them. Okay, and that's the stage at which we are right now. We have a whole computer pipeline that lets us get the images from the scanners when the patient is scanned. Then we can predict and generate essentially those plans. We can send them to the physicians, and then they can actually check them and either approve them or tell us that we need to go back to the drawing board and look at those algorithms again. So plan demos. What I would like to do at this point is to show you how, if I can make that work, how that would be done. So this is the planner that you have seen before. Oh, you don't see the top of it. Don't need to see the top of it. That's the planner that you've seen before. You just had a snapshot, and what would be done is to load the plan. Okay, so loading that plan will automatically load the images. It's going to load here a 3D volume of CT. There will be one CT volume and a couple of MR volumes. Takes a little while. I mean, those are relatively big image volumes. Okay, so that's the CT. Now I mentioned before that in CT you don't see soft tissues very well, but you see the bones. Okay, that's what you see here. So you see the bones very well. No, soft tissue is kind of a great thing. Okay, so that's why you need to have two things. You need to have the CT and the MR. And then because we have registered the CT with the MR, then we can fuse the two, and we can show the CT and the MR at the same time, and now we can have the best of both worlds. So we can see the bones in the CT, we can see the soft tissue in the MR. Right, so that is done. Say, then you can go and look for your anchors. So let the algorithm run a little bit. Takes a few seconds. On a small laptop, see that you don't need to have a big machine anymore. There it is. So we have one bone anchor, found 4 of them, which it's supposed to find. Of course, it's a demo, so I mean, I've tested it before, but usually it works pretty well. Now you can go verify, and that's what the surgeon would do. So you can actually verify if the anchors have been selected correctly. And so we have a little model of those anchors that are superimposed to the image, and so we can actually see if things have been picked up correctly. You can go to the next one, so that's your second anchor, the third one. Okay, you verify things. There's a fourth one, and now you're pretty satisfied. Things are good. then you can go, and what you see here is that the program has proposed an entry point for each of the trajectory, and that it has also proposed a target point. So that's preloaded, and you would typically not trust the program, and of course you need to go and verify the so you can verify your AC and PC points. Okay, so that would be the AC point. That one seems to be a little bit off. So that would be the AC point that is proposed by the program. You either approve it or don't approve it. If you don't approve it, you modify it. Go to the PC. Say, okay, everything is fine. I approve the plan. So what you need to do at this point is to create the platform. You need to go back to the CT, and there are several platforms that are available. In this case, we are going to choose a bilateral platform. Now we have seen that we have those 4 anchors. We have two trajectories, and so we want to have this bilateral platform. And then you need to essentially parameterize this platform. Now this platform has 4 legs, and we need to associate one bone anchor with every leg. Okay? Yes?
Are the anchors left in from the time of their scan to the time of surgery?
Yes, they are. They are. No, so they are very. Go ahead.
What are the anchors made of? What else?
I think it's titanium. I believe it is titanium. And yeah, and they can be left in there because they are so short that you can actually stitch the skin on top of them. Okay, so you.
Recording the hex position, and that's where they to be translated to the mounting. There's a hex position of in the anchor. That's the anchor.
There is the orientation of the anchor, the position and the orientation. That is correct. So you need to have the position and the orientation of the anchors. And so that's selected. So the program then will assign. It knows the type of platform you have. You say that, well, okay, I have 4 anchors, so it's likely that this one will go to the top left leg and so on. So you assign the leg to the anchor. You assign the trajectories. You have a left and a right. Then there is one parameter, which is the height. I need to go there. The height of the platform. And then you create your platform. Few checks. There it is. So the platform is there. Okay. You can take a look at it. See if you're satisfied with it. Look from different positions. I mean, you can actually look at it as a big picture if you want to. That's your platform. You say, well, this is good. If it was not high enough, for example, it could be such that it would hit the skull. That would not be a good design. So you'd have to change it. Or it could be that your entry point are such that the platform would look a little bit skewed, not look good. So you have to redesign it. So you can actually rework it and see until you're satisfied that the design of the platform is what you want to get. And when it is, then you save simply your configuration file. I mean, it's a small computer, a small file, small text file. You send that to the manufacturer, and that contains all the information that they need to be able to build this thing. Okay, and then it comes back, and it's because the anchors are still in the skull. Then the day of the surgery, you just open the skin again and just put the frame on top of the anchors, and you're in business. So I need to minimize that.
How
And
big is the transmitter that you're putting in? How big is it?
the electrode itself?
Yeah.
Well, the electrode, I mean, they are 1.5 millimeters per contact plus about 1.5 millimeter between contacts. So that would be 3 times 4, about 1 centimeter, 1.2 centimeters for the active part of the lead. But then, of course, you have a wire that goes up. I mean,
Where does the wire go?
the wire goes, so the wire goes out on the top of the head, and then it goes under the skin, goes I think behind the ear, and then goes here in the chest.
Put that in at the same time?
They don't put that in at the same time. They put it, I think it's a couple of days after the implant. So it's a second procedure. It's pretty minor. I mean, the only thing they have to do is a small incision, put the stimulator, and then pull the wire through. But it's not.
Is there any indications of like age, when you choose your patients, is it age?
That's really a medical question. I'm on the wrong side of the fence there. I don't know the exact age limit. I think it depends on the condition, and there are probably a number of factors involved with it. You have to be able to also sustain the procedure itself, and I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to talk for them. So that's something that would have to be addressed to one of the neurosurgeons. Now, so far what we've done is that we have talked only about position. Okay, so we knew the position of the implant in a number of people, and so what we've tried to do is to develop those algorithms that would use that information, try to predict where to put the implant in a new patient. But there is a whole, all kind of information that we have not used yet. Okay, and that's what we are in the process of doing now. During the procedure, we're acquiring the way the patient is reacting, so what's called the efficacy. Okay, so we know at which position in this particular patient a small voltage was very beneficial. In that one, if we had a small voltage, we would generate a side effect that is very undesirable. And so what we're in the process of doing is the same thing we are doing with the implant position, is to create maps that would tell us, okay, in average, things work pretty well there. Be careful, there is a side effect there. Be careful, there is a side effect there. And so this is a first attempt at creating those maps. What you see here is what we call an efficacy map. So we have taken information from a number of patients, and we have essentially created a little color map that tells you how likely it is that an implant will be very efficient. It will be very efficient here. I mean, the red, I don't know if we see any red. Yeah, there is a red. Red means very efficient, okay? And this blue or purple means not very efficient. So using that information, you would say, okay, in average, it seems to be better to go and put my implant at this position, okay, rather than at that position. And so now what we are trying to do is to provide that information at the time of planning. Not only are we going to have the location, the X, Y, Z position at which the implant has been placed, but we're also going to provide the electrophysiological information. Response of the patient to stimulation, also side effects. I don't have a slide that shows the side effect maps, but if we had the side effects map, that would allow maybe the surgical team to decide to go with one trajectory versus the other, because they would like to put as much as the electrode as possible in the region of high efficacy and avoid the region of side effects. Okay? So this is, we can build those maps. What we don't know at this point is if those maps are accurate and if they correlate with what is actually observed in the operating room, and that's what we're in the process of doing. Now, programming assistance, this is also something in which we can help. Now, after the procedure, the patient is scanned. Unfortunately, after the procedure, at least at this institution, one cannot get an MR. Okay? One can only get a CT because there is a metallic implant, and there are some risks associated with scanning someone in an MR scanner when with a metallic implant in the head. Okay, it's somewhat contentious. Some institution will scan, some institution will not scan, or radiologists don't want to scan. So the only thing we have is really what we call a post-op CT scan, and then you can see you can see the electrode in that CT scan pretty well. Of course, we can do registration, so we can take the pre-op MR, so we can take the image that has been acquired before the MR, and we can fuse the two. And now you can actually see where the implant has been placed with respect to the anatomy. So that's where it is. And I'm just zooming in here a little bit, and what you see are the so we can go and we can extract automatically the 4 contacts. We can show where each of those contacts is with respect to the anatomy. What we can also do is to go and do what we call segmentation, and the segmentation is simply labeling or defining or contouring structures in the MR images. And what I've done here is that I've delineated the optic tract. Okay. Now we don't need to do that in every patient. The only thing we need to do is to segment that optic tract in one reference volume in the atlas, because we can do registration, so we can deform everything, and so we can deform the optic tract that's within the atlas onto a patient. And now we can show, for example, that in this particular case, well, one of the contact was very, very close to the optic tract. So it's probably not the best contact to use at the time of stimulation because you may actually create side effects there, and it may be better to use one of those two contacts. Okay, on the other side, well, the other side is a little bit better. The implant is relatively far away from the optic tract, and so you don't have that problem. Okay? So the other structures that are more difficult to segment, and that's also something that we are trying to do, is to say, can we actually, at the time of programming, provide really this 3D information that would let the neurologist understand very quickly where the electrode is with respect to the surrounding structures. And then we'll have to test if the providing them that information is actually improving the programming, making it faster, making it easier, and so on and so on. It's a little bit of an uphill battle because this is not the way they're used to do it, right? So you really actually have to change things a little bit, and it's from an engineering point of view, it's kind of interesting because you will see that sometimes they will be resistant for a little while, and then once they see that it seems to be working, then all of a sudden we just cannot do it fast enough. I mean, so there is a little on-off switch there, which it's understandable. I mean, you've been used to do something for a long time. Do we provide more information? At this point, we don't know. But that's something again that we want to test, and we are we're in a position right now of being able to test it. So where do we stand? Well, we'll go back to our initial objectives. The repository is in place. We have data for about 250 patients at this point. We have 900 image volumes that are stored in that database. We have data points of recordings, intraoperative MERs, and so on, about 3,000 events. In terms of planning, well, you've seen the planning. Planning module is implemented, and that one is commercialized. Actually, FHC is selling it to customers there who are using the platform. We can predict automatically the AC and the PC. The automatic prediction of the target points is being evaluated retrospectively, and we have full connectivity with the database. What we are really eager to try now is to see if we can predict those, create those plans automatically on a routine basis, and have the physician load those plans in the planner directly from the database, and everything would be essentially preloaded. Okay, we are close to being able to do that. Well, yes, we are close. I'm not going into the details. So the programming, the programming module itself is implemented, connected to the database. We have automatic localization of the implants and visualization of those implants in dynamic images. You have seen that. Efficacy maps, side effect maps, and intraoperative information, which are something that I've not discussed, but it's also something that's kind of interesting in the procedure, is that there is a lot of information that is gathered during the procedure itself. I mean, stimulation, response to stimulation, and so on and so on. That information is essentially lost in translation between the surgeons and the neurologists. I mean, the neurologist is not necessarily in the operating room, and all the information that has been gathered in the operating room is not used or not usable at the time of programming. Now, if we have everything that is actually in the database, then the only thing that the neurologist has to do is to access that database, load the images, and then we can actually also superimpose all the information that has been acquired during the surgery. And then, then the big question is, well, so what? I mean, do we have an impact? I mean, does it make things better or not? That we don't know, and that's where we stand at this point. And can we actually improve the process? Does it make any difference for the neurologists? So, well, no, that's not it. There's the placement. No, the placement is something that is more difficult. It's ongoing. No, the idea there is to use those side effect maps, and then try if the target is not found during the surgery, can we use the information? Can we use the statistical information in the database to suggest to the physician in what direction to go? Okay, not very useful probably for someone who has been done a procedure for many years, because they have it in their head. Maybe useful for someone who is just starting doing it and doesn't have the experience that has been acquired over years and years and years of practice. And so, a thank you note. Actually, a thank you note to all of you because I mean this is your tax money that's at work. Right? I mean that's so this is the NIH has been funding a good part of that work and hopefully will continue to do it. So if you have any other question or any question, I'll be just on time it seems. I'll be happy to answer.
Parkinson's is a progressive disease.
Yes.
Right? So once you have these implants, does that stop progression?
It is believed that it does not, but there is a study that is ongoing here at Vanderbilt to test that hypothesis. The question is, usually those implants are placed relatively late in the disease when the patients do not tolerate medications very well. They are still on medication. I mean, the implant allows you to reduce the amount of medication, but typically they will still take medication. And so the implant is placed pretty late in the disease. There is a study that's called an early PD study that is ongoing here at Vanderbilt that will test exactly that hypothesis. Does actually the implant slow down the progression of the disease? And that is not known at this point. It's a hypothesis, but it's not known. I mean, it would be great, right? I mean, that would be really great, and that would change. I mean, that would be a sea change, really, because then you would try to have that procedure done as early as possible rather than late.
And the other disease that you mentioned, like
Dystonia. Dystonia, I don't think that's progressive. I think that's once you, I don't think it is progressive. Don't quote me on that, although. Sir.
Is the effect of DBS on the neuron thought to be stimulatory or inhibitory, or is that known?
It's not really known. The exact mechanism by which it works is not really known. Actually, before it was the nuclei was obliterated. I mean, they actually burn it. No, the advantage of this procedure is that it's reversible, and the other one was not. Yeah.
When the procedure is completed, everything is internal, or there's some external?
No, everything is internal. Everything is internal, and so the stimulator itself is also internal, and it's programmed through the skin. So yeah, that's you'd have yeah. I mean, I guess it would be possible. It would have infection issues if it was not the case. No, everything is internal.
Is there a period of time that there's an external, matter of days?
I don't think so. No, because first they put the implant, and then there is a second procedure in which they put the stimulator itself, and there was nothing that is really external. I mean, the only thing that's external are the bone anchors actually. So because those bone anchors are screwed in, and then you stitch the skin a little bit, but it's you have an open skin there, and it's done under local anesthesia. And then the bone anchors are removed after the procedure.
Would anything like this be in process for ALS?
I don't know ALS.
Lou Gehrig's.
I don't know. That I don't. I mean, I've not heard of it, and but no, that doesn't mean it's not the case. I just don't know. Sir.
The implementation of this is amazing, but I'm just curious, who came up with the idea that something like this might work? And what kind of studies were done in order to, fund this kind of operation?
It's a French neurosurgeon, Dr. Benabid of Grenoble, who started that. I just don't remember exactly when it started, but he's the one who was the first person to try it. I don't recall the exact date. That I would say probably around 10 years ago. It's relatively recent. I don't remember the exact date at which the first procedure was done.
So were you contacted? I mean, how did you
Well, I've been working in medical imaging for 20 years. I mean, that's what I do. And what we have been working on for a long time is registration. So that registration is the thing that we do for a number of reasons. I mean, we do registration for automatic segmentation. We have projects going on with radiation oncology department to do the automatic delineation of structures for radiation oncology planning. We can use segmentation to do automatic volumetric measurements of a number of structures. For example, is there any difference between two populations? I mean, one population which is a normal population who has some type of disease. I mean, is the brain smaller, larger, and so on and so on. So you can use segmentation for a number of reasons. And I knew about that procedure for quite some time. And I thought that it would be a good application of the algorithm that we have, and I couldn't really convince the neurosurgeon, to do it. And so what happened one day is that we had for some other reasons, actually the colleague of mine was measuring the accuracy of the platform, and they had a number of image volumes that were quite up. Post-op, and so we started playing with that, and then we played a little game with the surgeon. Say, okay, well, let's try to predict the target, okay, and compare the target that we predict with the target that one you predict and two you are going to pick up in the operating room. And on the volumes that we used for that particular study, we actually did better than he did. And so that convinced him that that was something that was worth exploring, investigating, and then one thing to lead to the other. Then we wrote a grant to the NIH, and we got the money, and we just kept going.
How many of those procedures have been done at this medical?
They are doing about three to four a week. I think we probably in the database we have 250 patients. It's probably about 250 implants that have been done, yes.
So what's the percentage of success?
I don't have the actual numbers, and I don't know. I would not venture in being sure what is success. I mean, improvement. In general, there is improvement. It's rare that there is really no improvement at all. How much improvement? I don't have the data.
That's going to be gratifying.
It is. I mean, and what we hope to be able to achieve is really to see the next step for us is really to have that thing online in the clinic, and we have reached that point essentially. So we know at this point we can get the data as soon as they are acquired. And we have a whole pipeline of algorithm that will then generate those configuration files, and the configuration files right now are available through the web. So we can actually send an email to the physician and say, okay, the file is ready. You can go download the file, and the only thing they have to do is to take the planner, download the file, and that will essentially pre-generate the whole thing, and then they have to approve it. So part of it, of course, is to say, well, how accurate are we, and how reliable is this whole thing? But we are getting there, and then what we would like to do is to start doing that with other sites, and then really you can see that database essentially as a byproduct can also become something that would be of value for comparison. One site may actually put the implant in a slightly different place, and then if you can start looking at the outcome of the procedure, say, well, is it better to put it there? Is it better to put it there? If you really have all that information for a large number of patients, you may be able to have an impact on the way the procedure is conducted. So that's the long term. That's really the long-term plan. Now there are quite a bit of there are of course challenges at every level. I mean, are the algorithms accurate? I mean, do they work, and so on and so on, which is good for us. So we still have something to do. Yes.
Do you ever reach a point where DBS no longer works in a patient who's had it implanted?
Yeah, I think it has happened. that the efficacy would go down. It's not too clear why. Sometimes the implant moves, and they actually come back and reimplant something else and put it at a different place. So some patients have been reimplanted. Again, I'm sorry not to be able to answer all the clinical questions, but I mean, I don't want to be.
Is your mounting piece, is that CAD-CAM'd in a rapid prototype?
It's a rapid prototype, that's right. It could actually, you could have this rapid prototyping device here, and that would actually make things much faster. It's still somewhat expensive. Actually, although some of those rapid prototyping devices are pretty cheap. But I don't know about the accuracy. So we would have to conduct an accuracy study. We just conducted an accuracy study on this thing, ex vivo. So we had a phantom essentially, created an accuracy study. This thing has an accuracy that is submillimetric. So it's about 0.5 millimeters at the point of implant. So it's very, very accurate. And I don't know, but that's a good question. I mean, I don't know what accuracy trade-off you would have to pay if you're using a cheaper rapid prototyping device. But they're not that expensive. I mean, it's just that they're not that expensive. So this is really conceivable. Now the same thing, the same platform is being used right now for a cochlear implantation. So there was a group of colleagues, and they came up with this idea of using this structure also to implant for cochlear implantation in a minimally invasive way. And we're involved with them too, also again for segmentation, because we can use some of our registration tool to do the segmentation of some of the structures, the facial nerve and the chorda tympani, which are very, very small structures that you have to avoid when you put your implant. Otherwise, the face would look a little bit abnormal. So that's their fear, and that's the big challenge. Being able to do things minimally invasively while not hitting those targets, and some of the registration and segmentation methods we have allow us to do that automatically, actually. So, yeah, and so it has, and I think that the company is also looking at other applications in the back and so on. Thank you. Any other question?